Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Let's start talking about your psychology. How can we get you to start doing things that you do want to do and stop doing things that you don't want to do? Well, the main way that we do that on this channel is through Q&A. Thank you for all your questions this week. I appreciate it. Let's get to them. If you do have a question for me, I just appreciate here. Even if you don't have a question, just any kind of reaching out, let me know what's going on. Animus at animusempire.com. All right, let's get to it. The first one is about Michael Jordan and his neurosis. To what extent that he has a neurosis, it seems like his neurosis drove him. So this is specifically in reference to The Last Dance. It seems like Michael Jordan's neurosis drove him to be a better competitor and arguably the best basketball player of all time. So wouldn't neurosis be a good thing? I come here every week. I want you to at least be aware of your neurosis so you can start to manage it instead of it managing you. And I think that's an indication that what Jordan was dealing with isn't like, I'm going to watch that. A huge Michael Jordan fan, of course. It wasn't any kind of real gambling problem. That was the main concern. It was something that he was aware of that he probably used for his own benefit, making it ultimately not neurosis, not what real neurosis is. I don't know. I think there's just these myths about neurosis. The first one is that it makes us interesting. Like in some kind of way, just having a neurosis makes us cool, and we have an edge, and we go and see a Hollywood movie. They have the main character is an alcoholic, and he's interesting because he's an alcoholic and he's fighting his demons. Yeah, if you know an alcoholic in real life, you go and watch those movies and you think, why isn't he completely tormenting everybody? Why isn't he beating his kids? That's what an alcoholic does. They beat their kids. Why isn't he beating his kids? They put this positive spin on neurosis. Maybe it has something to do with the cultural takeover in the 1960s. Maybe it has something to do with Thomas Has and the myth of mental illness. And hey, mental illness, it's just a different way of functioning. I mean, that kind of viewpoint is largely fallen out of favor. We don't really subscribe to that anymore, but I would argue we do have a system built on that. The homeless epidemic, right? Oh, well, who are we to say? Who are we to confine a schizophrenic to a mental institution if they don't want to be there? Yeah, there was, all these theories coming out around this time in the 60s, of course, that schizophrenia was just a different way of perceiving reality. Not only a different way of perceiving reality, but actually a better way. And the only reason why somebody was schizophrenic or presented with those symptoms is because they were living in a sick society. So, we understand the political leanings behind such a theory. But it's simply not true. Neurosis, and let alone psychosis, but neurosis is extremely boring. It is extremely unproductive. It is doing the same thing over and over again. Yeah, there's that quotation, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. I don't know. It's always attributed to Einstein. He probably didn't say that. It's actually not that great of a quotation. I would change that. I would say insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and not realizing what you're doing. Like, you think you're doing something different, or you just can't imagine living life in a different way. Seeking comfort, turning in on yourself, not seeking out challenges, not meeting new people. It's extremely boring. I think it was portrayed very well in, probably lots of places, but just what comes to mind right now is Twin Peaks Season 3. Jowd Ray, who has possessed Laura's mom, and she's just sitting there drinking, smoking, watching this loop of a boxing match over and over again, and it's just scary. It's scary. I mean, it's no wonder why, before we got a better understanding of what's going on, I don't know if we really do know what's going on, but before we got a better understanding of what's going on, we would say, oh, they're possessed. And of course, you would convince yourself, you would start to see ghosts if that's what your mom was doing. It's like something's not right there, and it's just very damaging, and not in a cool way, not in a cool, self-destructive Motley Crue in 1985 kind of way, but just sad and depressing, and just having no integrity, no sense of adventure, no sense of like going out and having fun, no sense of any attribute that we would attribute a positive value to. Just nothing like that. Just repetition over and over again. And I think there's other myth about neurosis that it makes us productive in some way. Like with perfectionism. I'm a perfectionist. It means I always need to do a good job. You are productive with your perfectionism to the extent that you are aware of it and you control it instead of it controlling you. That's the extent that you're productive with your perfectionism. And really, if you really see somebody with perfectionism, by the way, I mean, it's like when people say, oh, I have OCD because you have some obsessive thoughts. You really don't. Or, oh, I'm autistic. I'm on a spectrum. Yeah, you're not really on a spectrum. You got to see somebody who's really on the spectrum. I'm not offended by that. I'm not, oh, this is, somehow damaging to people who really do have mental disorders. You're, what's it called, stigmatizing them. I don't agree with that. But you're not a perfectionist. You're not on the spectrum. You don't have OCD. Somebody who has perfectionism is not productive at all. I've known people like this. I work with people like this. They can't get anything done. It's perfectionism to such an extent you can't get anything done. So, yeah, I think neurosis, I put that in quotations, I think neurosis can be helpful if you can become aware of it. But I think as soon as you become aware of it and start to use it for your own ends, as Jordan clearly does in this documentary, like he's playing little games in his head. And he even makes up, I think at some point, I only watched it once and it was when it came out, I think he even makes up what somebody has said about him so he can be more competitive in the next game. And then they interview that guy who supposedly said something about him, and you're like, I didn't say that. I didn't even see Michael Jordan that day. I don't know what he's talking about. He's making things up so he can be more competitive. He knows his switch. Jordan knows his trigger. I mean, this is not neurosis. It may be some kind of unhealthy behavior to some extent. It looked like, I mean, you aren't asking this about the documentary, but it looks like there's some validation from his dad that he's going for still. So it could be unhealthy from that respect. But as long as it's not too bad and you're aware of it, which Jordan clearly was, he clearly has a lot of awareness of what he's doing, then, it can really be productive. I think the most striking thing about the Last Dance documentary is that this is funded by Jordan. I mean, so even with all this bias going in, I mean, Jordan is making this, and I'm not criticizing Jordan for doing this, by the way. I love Michael Jordan. But he is funding this as a way to I mean, that this is part of the competitive edge that, I mean, he's still doing that and just, he can't play basketball anymore. He's just doing it in a different way. Like some people were saying, like he got wind that somebody on ESPN one time said that he's not the best basketball player of all time. So he just funds this 10-part documentary, 8-part documentary. So this is painting him in the best light possible. And even then, he doesn't come off as that. I mean, not that he's not a great guy, but it's just not that interesting. I mean, if you've seen the first 2 episodes, you've seen all of them. Bulls get down in a series. Somebody doubts Michael Jordan, and then he plays this game with himself. He says that somebody says something about him, even when that person really didn't say something. He plays up instances that do happen to make them a bigger deal than they are, so he can get competitive. It's like, that's just what you keep doing. I'm sorry, that's simply not that interesting. It's not. So I guess this goes back to my first myth about neurosis, is that it makes you interesting. I'm not sure Jordan is an interesting guy. He's a great basketball player, and you can appreciate him from that respect. But he's just not that interesting of a guy, and I think it shows in this documentary. I think he was too focused on this documentary and making him seem like the best basketball player of all time, which he is, let's just say that. But, I don't know, it's just kind of lame. Like, everybody talks about that story of he got wind again. He got wind of, not the fart kind of wind. He got wind of somebody, this was a while ago. I don't even know if this person is still in the NBA, but somebody in the NBA at one point, maybe it was 15 years ago or something, was saying that they could beat Jordan one-on-one. Jordan heard about this through the grapevine, came to that team's practice, played this player one-on-one, and beat him, and made some point about, dude, don't ever say you could beat me one-on-one. I'm the greatest of all time. And people think like that's an awesome story. I don't know. That sounds kind of lame to me. It sounds like you're still 19. Don't you have a family? Don't you have a wife? What are you doing? Why don't you go play golf? What's the big deal? That doesn't sound interesting to me. That sounds like a guy who has some kind of validation complex, which he was able to become aware of and use for his advantage. So in a sense, that is kind of a complex, but when you're aware of it, you can use it to your advantage. Not real neurosis, right? Not like the Jowdray, Laura's mom in season 3 of Twin Peaks. I don't know. I really liked his Hall of Fame speech because you could just see what he's doing from a distance, but you're not really seeing what's behind it. And I don't know, Jordan just comes off as kind of a simple guy, and maybe you need that to be the greatest basketball player of all time. I don't know. I'm not concerned with making you the greatest basketball player of all time. I'm concerned more about expanding your consciousness, making you more aware of your actions, more aware of your emotions, so you can really begin to control your life as opposed to it controlling you. And I think 100% of the time, when you do that, you are going to be more productive and way more interesting. Don't believe, like the cool portrayal of schizophrenic played by, Angelina Jolie on some movie. It's not like that. It is awful. Yeah, I guess we got a similar question a couple weeks ago about doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. Is what gets you into working out, is it just to impress girls? I think that's fine. Like, if that's all that can get you into the gym at first is just to impress girls, that's fine. We can work through that issue simply by working out, and then you can start to realize, oh, I'm doing this for me. And then as you become more in touch with reality, you realize, girls really don't care about that too much. All right, next question, something that we talk about a bunch, but I guess there's still questions about it. That's okay. I mean, you can make a whole podcast on just this topic alone, the difference between neediness and having needs. So I think the reason why there's so much resistance to seeing my point on this is because, I mean, you go and do the whole manosphere red pill thing, and there's some great pieces of advice in there. There's also some really damaging pieces of advice. I think pieces of advice that are so damaging, it more than makes up for, or I guess in this case detracts for anything good that you do here, and just any truth that you do hear about, women and dating dynamics. Which, by the way, I just want to say, I think this is just, from my perspective as an old man, I was born in 1982. I don't know, when I went to college, it just seemed, and maybe it was just the guys I was hanging out with, it just seemed like everybody was, quote, red-pilled. Like this idea that a woman's going to love you for who you are, and if you're just nicer to her, the reason why that girl doesn't like you is because you didn't buy her the right kind of flowers. I mean, this seems like a very recent thing, and this is just from my perspective. If a girl didn't like you in 2000 when you were in college, there was no question. It was, you're lame. Or look, this other guy, he's way better looking, or he's way cooler than you. It was never a question of that. I don't know. It just seemed like the red pill manosphere is a reaction to something very particular, but it's a reaction from this kind of mindset that would think that a woman would like you or think that a woman wouldn't like you just because you didn't get her the right amount of flowers of the right kind, or you weren't thoughtful enough on a date. Is that making any sense? I feel like I'm confusing myself here. It just seems like the manosphere and red pill community is presenting itself like it's this great revelatory experience for men. Where from my perspective, this is what men have believed for eons. And the reason why you think it's revelatory is because of it's like some strange, like later Gen Y, Gen Z. I don't know what happened. Just a dehumanization, despiritualization that maybe young men have gone through. Anyway, I think the confusion here is why this is maybe a difficult topic for some people, and why I keep getting questions about it, is because I think there is a dominant theme, a dominant message throughout the manosphere red pill, and that is, the cardinal sin of dealing with women is being needy. Showing any kind of neediness. So I come along and I say having needs is important, and it kind of crosses the wires, and you think, well, wait, No, neediness is the cardinal sin. That's the problem. Um, I think there's also similar confusion around ego. Typically having a strong ego, having a strong sense of yourself has just been nothing but a good thing, but we've kind of warped that definition to conflate egoism with insecurity. Now, if anybody with any kind of psychoanalytic training says, "Oh, having a healthy ego is strong," it just doesn't make any sense. No, ego is the enemy. Didn't you read that one Ryan Holiday book? So I think neediness in this context is a misnomer. It is not true. It has nothing to do with needs at all. I mean, really what neediness is validation, approval seeking. That's what you need when red pill manosphere guys talk about neediness. But that's not the same as having needs. In fact, I would say it's the inverse of having needs. The only antidote to needy behavior, needing a woman's validation, needing her approval, is putting your own needs first, learning how to express those. That's why guys get in these, nice guy situations where they have a crush on a girl for 4 years and then it doesn't work out, because they are not expressing their needs. So a common need that guys have a difficult time expressing because they're uncomfortable with it is, of course, sexuality. I'm not going to express my sexual needs to this girl who I just met, who I have a crush on, because for whatever reason I don't think I'm good enough. I'm too isolated. I just don't have the emotional regulation. So what I'm going to do as a compensation for that, this is mostly unconscious, by the way, what I'm going to do as a compensation for that is try to get her sexual approval. Right? And that's the neediness. That is the dark side of not having needs. Yeah, that's what it is. It's the dark side. You deny having your own needs. So what you inevitably do is present like somebody who has tons of needs, but you're not conscious of them, and then it just comes off as gross, or girls say gross or creepy. That's how it presents. That's how it feels to women. I mean, not just women, just in any guy, in any kind of situation. I mean, women can be needy to guys. It happens, quite often, probably more often than people say. But I think most guys have been on the receiving end of neediness, and you go, ooh, that's what it's like? Oh, that's strange. It's like it's a great learning experience. Just like I think going to a gay bar, and some huge gay guy comes and hits on you, and you're like, oh, this is what it's like. This is what it's like when I go hit him. I think I'm going to change, how I approach this. So yeah, that's I think the main point there. I mean, I was thinking about this as I was preparing, setting my lights up this morning. I think this is one of the reasons why dogs are so endearing. Dogs are endearing because they have needs, and they let you know about it. Hopefully they do it in some kind of a healthy way, but they have needs and they let you know about it. That's why people start to think that their dog has a personality. It really doesn't. It's just not ashamed of its needs. But even that, low functioning kind of personality, just simply having a need and being okay with it, I think that's what makes dogs so endearing. So we have a dog here, and I'm sitting on the couch eating blueberries, and it's, looking at the blueberries, looking at me, looking at the blueberries, looking at me. I mean, this is what my dog does, right? And it's endearing because, okay, this is how she operates. She is expressing her needs in a, not totally crazy way. If she just, jumped on you whenever you had blueberries, that would be really annoying, but also kind of endearing too, even though that wouldn't be the healthiest behavior. But I think people just are so tuned out of their needs sometimes. And they think, well, if I have needs, then people won't like me. I'm just going to fly under the radar. Oh, if I have needs, if I'm going out with this girl, if I have sexual needs, if I have any kind of emotional, intimate needs, and I express those, oh, she's going to think I'm creepy. And then you suppress that, and then what ends up happening is you become even creepier than you ever could have been if you were expressing your needs in a healthy way. I mean, very similar with sexuality. People repress their sexuality. It doesn't always come out in some perverse way, but it's just not the healthiest kind of way to live. You have sexual needs. You have emotional needs. You have physical needs. The question is, how well do you express them? How well can you be aware of them, and how well do you express them? Now, when you don't do that, it becomes neediness. But of course, you read Reddit Bill Manosphere stuff, and they say like, oh, don't, just be cool. Don't be overly expressive on a date or something. And it's And like anybody who has any experience, sorry to pull that card, anybody who has any experience just goes, no, that's not how it works at all with women. I mean, typically, that's what turns women on, right? Is just you letting them know that you're interested in a healthy way, without any agenda, without any, without even a hint of approval seeking. Just, I need to let you know because I'm like the dog who wants the blueberries just looking at the blueberries. It's actually a very powerful thing. And I think this leads into the next question. What do therapists do when they're attracted to their clients? And I think that the main reason why therapists are attracted to their clients, and I guess the implication of the question isn't just physically attractive, but just like emotionally, I have a crush on my client, I'm in love with my client. I think 9 times out of 10, I haven't actually seen this happen, but when I've heard about it and I've read cases about it, it's a guy, of course, who's very lonely, and some woman who's decently attractive comes into his office and opens up emotionally, and he hasn't had that in 5 years because, who is he to have needs? Typical, like, kind of beta male therapy perspective. Who am I to have needs? I shut that down, but it's there. It's there. A woman shows up. There's some kind of intimacy in therapy, sure. You feel that closeness, and you just associate that with, I must love her. So what do you do is, you gotta manage yourself. You gotta manage your boundary first before becoming a good therapist. That needs to come first, and if you can't do that, then it almost doesn't matter what you do. Definitely what you do is you no longer see that client again. But you gotta maintain your boundaries. And most therapists just simply can't do that. People talk about boundaries all the time, but specifically how to go about building them, it's just not talked about. Because it runs up against this idea that it's okay to have needs, it's okay to put yourself first. It's okay if you're in a situation, if something's going on and you don't like it, it's okay to direct the situation, it's okay to express your needs, it's okay to be wrong, it's okay to be offensive with your needs. I think that goes very much against our Christian Marxist programming, that we've been subject to. Not like you don't have a choice in the programming. That would be a Marxist argument. But we do have a choice. But we got to be aware of just how these implicit messages of your sexuality is wrong, your needs are wrong. That's just not useful for healthy psychological functioning. Then you get a guy like that who's raised a Christian, goes to graduate school, becomes a Marxist, and then he's 25, 30 years old. His hormones are hopefully still there. A decently looking woman comes in, and that's it. It's not a decision. The lock doesn't decide to open when you put the right key in it. Sorry to use an obvious sexual metaphor, but it doesn't decide. The lock's there. When the key shows up, something happens. I know it's compounded even more by the whole cognitive behavioral therapy hegemony, DBT, ACT, whatever it is, where you just change your thought. Oh, you have a thought here? Just change it. You have an emotion? Well, how is that emotion irrational? It doesn't work like that. You have to go, why would you be in this position in the first place? How are you undeveloped to the extent where a woman comes in for 3 sessions and you think you're in love with her? That's sad. That's really pathetic. We all do it to some degree, but hopefully you do it in a healthy way. I got my picture of my portrait of Hugo up there. I was doing that with Hugo. I was projecting out some kind of relationship. I got the here, and I don't know if you can see Star Trek here. That's why I watch Star Trek, because I want to be friends with Spock and Bones and Kirk. Well, no. When I'm fantasizing about being on the Enterprise, I'm Kirk, of course. And Spock and Bones are my friends, Scotty is my friends. Ooh, I have an on-again, off-again thing with Yeoman Rand, right? It's, as Leela says in Futurama, it is touchingly pathetic. But that's true, we all do that. You just have to manage, you just have to be aware of what you're doing. Okay, next question here is, how do you come up with good consequences for children, especially on the fly? Well, I will say, first of all, that I have a view on this. I have a view on how to punish children, how to give them consequences, how to raise them, and a lot of this I will get from a book called Positive Discipline. And there's other kind of peaceful parenting books, but it's all in this vein of, positive discipline, peaceful parenting, and it all comes from the perspective, and this is going to seem strange and super hippie, leftist, progressive. Maybe it is to some degree, but I think they're, what the hippie, progressive, leftist thread did in society in raising children, that there is a healthy thread in that, and maybe this is part of that. Also, I think this comes from Montessori kind of education too, so it really started before then, but I would say when you're talking about consequences or punishment for children, good or bad, say, hey, if you do this, then you'll get more screen time, or if you don't do this, I'm going to take away your screen time, or I'm going to ground you, or I'm going to put you in timeout, whatever it is. I hate to burst any bubbles here, but it simply doesn't work. Consequences and punishment, it just doesn't work. I mean, it can work in the short term. There can be a strong corrective mechanism behind a consequence or a punishment in the short term. Kids can be afraid. I mean, that's what happens. That's what makes them work. They're afraid, and then they obey you out of fear. And that can work in the short term, and we can show studies like that. We can show studies that cognitive behavioral therapy works in the short term. It doesn't treat the child like a conscious being, even a partly conscious, growing into his own consciousness kind of being. And that's why it doesn't work effectively long term. And by the way, I mean, people always criticize me for talking about parenting because I don't have any kids. Well, I will say on this topic that I don't think I've talked about this before, but my wife is pregnant. She is due in December, so we have 3 months left of no kid. I don't think I have talked about that. Boy, it's exciting, I think. I think my dominant feeling about it is excitement. Maybe that'll change once a kid comes and I'm just completely overwhelmed. I mean, look, I'm 38 years old. Like, what else am I going to do, right? If I was 28, then maybe it would be a bigger deal. But, so, I mean, this is how I'm going to raise my kid. I don't know if I'm going to do it all the time. I'm laying this out as just an overall healthy way to raise a kid. You don't have to do it all the time. If you don't do it, you just recognize what you're doing that isn't in line with, I think, healthy parenting principles. And then you just go back and apologize if you need to, or, do whatever it is you need. But punishment doesn't work. I mean, so the idea is that behind punishment and consequences is that your child doesn't want to be part of the family. That your child doesn't love you and doesn't want to be part of the family. In such a scenario, then I could see maybe how punishment and consequences working. But I mean, one of the number one drives in a child is to love you, is to be part of the family. They want to help out. They want to be a part of it. If that isn't happening, then it's, something emotional. Like they're confused about something. There's an emotion there that they can't process. And that's why they're acting out. And that's true 100% of the time. All the time. And I understand it can be difficult to see that's what's going on in the situation, especially like you have one of your kids like hitting a sibling, or something. I don't know, what's the worst thing that a child can do, like have a hissy fit or throw a temper tantrum in the middle of a grocery store. We can see in the moment how that can be, of course, overwhelming. But 100% of the time, kids love you. They want to love you. They love the family. They want to be part of the family. I mean, very similar to Montessori education. The premise behind if you go to like a typical public school and you sit there and you do homework, and if you don't get a good grade, or if you don't do well on the homework, then you get enough. The premise behind this is that kids don't want to learn. Right? You have to kind of trick kids to learn. You have to do like you have to gamify learning, and you have to watch movies and go on field trips to learn, and that's simply not true. I mean, kids love to learn. We all love to learn. If they're not learning, then you need to maybe present the information in a different way. But giving punishments and grades, I understand why we have to do that, especially in the public education sphere. It's this huge bureaucracy. So consequences and punishment doesn't work. What does work, and again, I get a lot of this from positive discipline, peaceful parenting kind of ideas, maybe some Montessori method kind of ideas here is modeling, right? I mean, that's modeling works. You want your kid to behave in a certain way, you need to act in that way. And I'm not just talking about, physical actions. Those do matter. What you say matters. How you treat other people matters. But what matters the most is your emotional state. I mean, without a doubt, the biggest impact you will have on your children is your unconscious. To the extent that you are unaware of your unconscious, that is going to have the biggest impact on your child. Nothing's more powerful in a child's life than the unlived life of their parent, to quote Carl Jung, and that is totally true. And it's not just, what you couldn't do, and now you wanted to be a baseball player, but your dad discouraged you, and now you have a son, and you want him to be a baseball player unconsciously, and it gets, really strained and competitive because of that. Yeah, there's that, but there's also whatever you feel anxiety about, whatever you're uncomfortable about, that's what your child's going to be uncomfortable about. So the number one tip really to be a better parent is therapy. Manage issues. Manage issues that you are avoiding. That's really the first step. So yeah, modeling affects kids, but it's really emotional modeling. The other thing that's really important for kids and everybody, I don't have kids yet, I guess, but I do deal with people. I think these are very good premises to think about when dealing with people. Dealing with girls. When you're single and dating with girls, I mean, this is a great way to manage girls. This is a great way to manage clients. If a client isn't doing something I don't want, would I get upset? Do I give them consequences? I mean, that's just silly. No, you open up communication. We'll get to it. So routines is another thing. And of course, guess who else needs a routine, right? We all need routine. Children need routine. They crave it. So anything that you want them to do, just normal functioning, you make it a part of the routine. So I guess, I don't know, I hear that getting kids to brush their teeth or getting a toddler to brush his teeth is a big deal. So that's just part of the routine, and that's what the whole family does. The child wants to be part of the family, that's what they do. If it comes to your child not wanting to brush his teeth and you yelling at him to, that's just not the proper context for communicating. And I guess, redirection, this is very similar with dogs. You can't get a dog to stop doing something. You can redirect, especially if it's something natural. So if a kid, I don't know, I can't think of an example, but whatever a kid's doing that isn't too damaging, just redirect it. Get them to do something that you want them to do. Emphasize what you want them to do as opposed to what you not want them to do. I mean, with a dog, my dog likes to eat grass. She's really not supposed to eat grass. But really she just wants something in her mouth. So we kind of redirect that, and I just give her a stick and I put it in her mouth, and she carries that on the walk, and then she doesn't want to eat grass, right? You're not going to get the dog to stop eating something. I mean, that's how it explores, right? It puts stuff in its mouth. Same thing with I guess kids put things in their mouth. Okay, get them to if they're putting something unhealthy in their mouth that they shouldn't, give them something that is okay to put in their mouth. And then if your child's really doing something wrong, like if they hit a sibling, or they're terrorizing somebody, or they're screaming and having a temper tantrum, the first thing to do, especially but it's with everybody. Well, with smaller children, the first thing to do is connect, and then soothe. As they become older, it's just about connection. You're not there to soothe them. But smaller children from 0 to 4, really, you connect and you soothe. There is an emotional issue going on. If they're acting out, they do not want to be acting out. And there's the same thing true with criminals, adult criminals. You don't want to be violent, but you're in a situation where you can't feel like you can express yourself, so you act out. You feel suffocated, you feel unheard, and so you act out. So if your child is doing something really terrible, like hitting somebody, or I don't know, terrorizing their sister, what's going on? Kind of remove them from that situation. What's going on? Talk to me. Tell me what you're feeling. You'll be surprised what even a young toddler will tell you. I mean, they're not going to put in huge sentences or anything, but I feel frustrated. Okay, I understand you're feeling frustrated. It's the same thing with therapy. It's the same thing with dealing with anybody that you want them to do. You connect and then correct. Say, well, okay, after you connect, then you kind of direct and say, this is what I want you to do. And then, I mean, it just doesn't happen that once the kid's in that state where he's feeling heard and connected with, that he doesn't do the right thing eventually. Doesn't do what you want. And they think people will get critical of this because they think they're rewarding the child. Like, oh, so my kid acts out and then I get down, and I give him FaceTime and I get him positive attention because he terrorized his sister. And I'm sorry, you're just coming at this from a bankrupt mindset. You're coming at this from a Pavlovian operant classical conditioning mindset, which can work. I'm not saying it doesn't, but humans have this thing called consciousness, and that's what you're working on. Part of consciousness is emotional regulation. Thinking about this in operant classical conditioning, you are, in a sense, lining up your kid to think of himself as an animal. You are inhibiting his conscious development, the development of his consciousness. This is not behaviorism. I mean, that can work on rats, that can work on dogs, but in developing children, that does not work long term. Same thing, like I mentioned, if your kid's throwing a temper tantrum, without a doubt, the way to handle that, like if you're in a restaurant or something, your kid's throwing a temper tantrum, not quieting down, they're upset. They're upset, they feel unheard, they feel repressed, oppressed by that situation, and they're acting out, like a maybe modern day protester, right? So you remove that from that situation. You remove them, you go out, you take them outside, and you just kind of stay with them. You're just kind of there with them. I think depending on your relationship with your child, how your child interacts with you, you can talk with them about what's going on. And then once they calm down, once they feel like you can understand them, which is not that difficult to understand a freaking 2-year-old, right? Then you say, okay, I'm going to go back in. I want you to behave in this way. Then they go in another tantrum, whatever. I understand. You're probably going to yell. I understand that happens, but that doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. These are just general principles that I'm going to employ when this kid comes. I'm sure I'm not going to do it all the time. I'm sure I'm going to yell and scream and lose my temper and get really upset and, take something personally. Like if this kid does something, I'm going to take it personally, right? That's not the issue with the kid, though. I got to recognize that that's my issue. That's my insecurity coming up is triggered by the kid. And this is I didn't get this from any kind of positive discipline kind of books, but this is exactly what needs to happen with the prison system. This is exactly the problem with the prison system. With any luck, in 100 years, we're going to look back on what we're doing with prisoners now. Kind of a hot button issue for me. Oh, you commit a crime and we're going to put you in a cage? Especially something like solitary confinement, like that is completely counterproductive. What prisoners need, what kids need, what we all need when it comes to changing our behavior is to connect first. Feel seen first. Let somebody else see what's going on first. That's what makes you conscious. And then from there, changing the behavior is going to be much more natural. And this is how we need to set up prisons, is, same with anything. Let me see, I'm gonna do one more question here. Sorry if you're just listening to this, I'm futzing with the camera here. All right. Okay, so we'll do one more question here. Why do women get song or feel like some deep connection and meaning from songs like she mentions Christina Aguilera song. There's also like a Beyonce song, like women feel empowered by a Beyonce song or a Lady Gaga song. Why are women so duped by these songs? You feel some kind of connection with somebody that isn't really there. I guess this goes back to, why do therapists get a crush on clients? Because you're projecting out a relationship that isn't there. You're depressed, right? You're not getting your needs met, and you're the lock. And you don't realize that until this key comes along and opens you up. It's not like the lock decides to be opened by the key. It simply happens when the key shows up. And I think it's true for any kind of relationship, projected or otherwise. We create this is what humans have been doing for a really long time. And this is what I do with Hugo. This is what I do with Star Trek up there. I project out relationships as an adaptive mechanism. I want to be part of an enterprise. I wanted a grandfather figure like Hugo, maybe, who could just like sit me down and tell me stories that just encapsulate everything important about humanity. So I project out this relationship with Hugo that clearly isn't there. I mean, it's there to some extent. I mean, it could be sadder. I mean, it's projecting a Star Trek relationship, a friendship with Spock or Bones. You know, me as Kirk, of course. That's a lot sadder. But this is what we do. This is what humans do. We all do it to some degree. And I would challenge you to look at where you are doing it. So when you see, a woman feeling all empowered by a Beyonce song or a Lady Gaga song, you don't go, oh, look at how stupid they are. You think, this is what I do too. I create relationships in my mind to satisfy emotional needs. Now, just like Michael Jordan, it's okay to do that. Just understand what you're doing and use it for its own benefit. Maybe I'm like lacking emotional connection. Maybe I need friends. I'm watching too much Star Trek. Maybe I need to go join a gentleman's club. I don't know, like a Knights of Columbus kind of thing. Who knows? Just understand what it's telling you. Understand what you're doing and understand what it's telling you. We create, that's what humans do. We create relationships. We create stories. If you want to love humanity, I don't know if you care about loving humanity, but if you want to, you gotta love that we do these things, even to ridiculous degrees, even to a degree of Lady Gaga singing a song about how you're oppressed and how you're a strong fighter, survivors of sexual abuse. Okay, this is what we need to do to cope and adapt with reality. Same thing with conspiracy theories, right? These are stories that we tell ourselves because it satisfies something psychologically. Now, obviously, not every conspiracy theory is true. Some of them are. Not every one is true. But you have to appreciate why somebody would want to do something like this. And you have to see how you do it too. I mean, it's a conspiracy theory. Go back to your the previous question here, right? It's a conspiracy theory if your 3 or 4 year old's acting up and you take it personally. You think it's something about you, right? That's a story that you tell yourself to make yourself feel important. That's a conspiracy theory. That's what women do when they're listening to a Lady Gaga, Beyonce song. And we just got to empathize with this. I mean, I think that's the main takeaway. We are in the age of, what do I always say? Age of emotional disconnection, the age of attachment disorder. This is what we need. We do not know how to be intimate. It's very difficult for us to go back to what I was saying about needs. We're still trying to untangle like neediness versus having needs. What? Aren't these the same thing? Isn't being needy, isn't having need? The worst thing is not the death of seduction or attraction. These are very simple concepts, and it's not that the reason why we don't get these isn't because we're stupid, is because there's just so much emotional baggage there. So it feels good. It makes sense to listen to Lady Gaga, to watch Star Trek. Like Slender Man. You guys remember Slender Man? I think that was maybe in the early 20-teens, maybe a little bit before that. But just like this group of 13-year-old girls in Wisconsin who like tortured, and I don't know if they killed, but they definitely tortured another girl. Pretty serious. And the reason why they did it is because of Slender Man. What's Slender Man? It's just this idea of a father. They didn't have fathers. It's that idea of a father figure they projected out. But of course, it's coming from a 13-year-old girl, so of course it's going to be psychotic. But it's this shadowy, tall, like 8 foot tall, really long arms kind of figure who they saw in the woods, who's telling them to do this. Not unlike Jojo Rabbit. Yeah, the Jojo in Jojo Rabbit. Right? He is creating this relationship with Hitler. There's no dad, but he's projecting out an 11 or 12-year-old boy's idea of what a father is, and it's obviously it's the psychotic Hitler. We create relationships. We are relationship creating, meaning creating machines. This is just how we operate. This is how we get along in the world. And again, with Michael Jordan, it's not about not doing it. It's just about noticing when you do it, so you can, inform your decision making. You can gain more insight on your neurosis. as Jordan clearly did. And then you can use it to your own advantage. Okay, I need relationships. I have needs. I need relationships. I'm going to go out and communicate these needs. That's what humanity is. And, in that context, going back to what I was talking about before, of course, punishment and consequences with children are not going to work long term. If we were dogs, they would, but they don't. Of course, CBT isn't going to work long term for the similar reasons. Oh, you have a negative thought, just change the thought. What are you talking about? The thought isn't about the thought. The relationship isn't about the relationship. The neurosis isn't about the neurosis. It's saying something about you. That's the idea here. And, just the way to manage that is, of course, manage your emotions, right? Figure out how your emotions, what emotions are, how they work, how you manage your emotions. Figure out how to talk through your emotions step by step in a healthy way, in a way other people will look at you talking about your emotions and they won't even call you emotional. They'll just think, oh, that's a cool guy, or that's a cool chick. Because the word emotional has become such a pejorative, but that's just emotional dumping. But when you learn how emotions work, when you learn how to talk about your emotions in a way that not only helps you, but helps other people, by connecting with them, by taking responsibility for the emotion, then you can become really powerful. And that's my theory why we like rock stars so much. Because that's the one guy who's emotionally honest. Let's just look at him. We're just drawn to this. Like, we're drawn to these relationships. Like a bunch of 13-year-old girls in Wisconsin without a dad are going to be drawn to Slender Man. It's the same thing. So that's what we work on here. animusempire.com/schedule. We do free 30-minute consultations. Just, reach out. Let me know what's going on. If you have any questions or just want to reach out in general, animus@animusempire.com, and I'll leave it there. Thank you guys, and I wish you all the reality and consciousness that you can handle.